and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help motivate, inspire, and educate others to make the world a better place. Today, I am delighted to be joined by the wonderful Graham Frost. Graham has had an incredibly interesting career and actually born into a fundamentalist church, decided it wasn't for him, left age 17, was in Borstal age 19, and after being led into a life of petty crime, he had to really decide who it was he wanted to be. Age 22, he was diagnosed with testicular cancer. And 15 months later, having overcome that challenge, he started again, built a very successful career, which took him into learning and development in the 90s. Part of a team that broke a new ground with training into the railway division and achieved investors in people. He's also been responsible for a program that won the National Training Award in 2009. 14 years membership of Toastmasters International and a professional member of the Professional Speaking Association as well. So welcome to the show today, Graham.
Thank you very much. And it's great to be here, and thank you very much for having me.
Delighted to have you on the show. Delighted. And I've watched some of your videos and actually done quite a lot of reading up about you. So, tell our listeners a little bit about, those who maybe have not yet heard of you, tell them a little bit about, kind of what you've been up to of late. And perhaps we can then start to go into some of the really fascinating stories and encounters you've had upon your career journey and life to date.
Okay, so thanks. What I'm up to lately is professional speaking, and a few years ago, probably about 2010, 2011, I've told people about my story over the years, and they kind of, people said, that's quite an inspiring story, you should do something with that. And I just thought it was me, I thought it was, I didn't think there was anything particularly inspiring about it. And so it transpired in 2010-11 that I walked away from a job which I was no longer happy in, and decided, right, what am I going to do? And I thought, right, I'm going to write a book. So the first thing I did was wrote a book about my early life, which was something I'd probably always subconsciously wanted to do. Because I used to love writing when I was at school, and it was the only thing I was ever any good at school. And so I wrote a book, and then because I was in Toastmasters, I was doing public speaking anyway, and I had come from being somebody who, as a small child, was incredibly shy and wouldn't speak to anybody, and I had red hair. If you can believe, looking at me now, that I ever actually had red hair, quite incredible. But I had red hair and freckles, and I used to blush very easily.
Oh, bless you.
I was always embarrassed as a child. So the idea that I would ever do anything that involved standing up in front of audiences was completely against anything that I might have believed about myself. But gradually it kind of happened. And then I found, I went through the process. And this is, comparatively recently, of realizing that I enjoyed speaking in front of an audience. So, I thought, well, I'm going to progress a career as a professional speaker. I do other things as well. I still do a lot of training work, that kind of thing. I help people to, I like to say that I help people to make better choices. And that's one of my sort of things that somebody else actually gave me that strapline comparatively recently. I like it because I've gone through life making not always the right choices, but if I've made the wrong choice, I've always managed to get myself back on the right track again. And it's kind of, life's a journey, and it's full of ups and downs. But I think I've probably had more ups than I've had downs, to be honest with you. And so that's just because of attitude and that kind of thing. So what I'm doing now is I'm establishing a career as a professional speaker, which is, it's not as that's probably one of the most difficult things to get into, because there are quite a lot of speakers chasing not that much work, to be quite honest with you. And anybody that says they're a professional speaker, you have this people have this kind of idea that it's a glamorous lifestyle. You're traveling the world, and there are a few professional speakers that do have that lifestyle. But most of us, I mean, I just like to share my life story with an audience in the hope that it might inspire people. And I think the thing that really got me started on that was about 2011 or 12. I was asked to speak to a group of 17-year-olds, about 250 17-year-olds in Milton Keynes, by a friend of mine, at an awards ceremony. And I did the talk, and afterwards I was packing my stuff away in the car park afterwards, and these two 17-year-old lads came up to me, and they said, and I changed out of my suit, so I was kind of wearing jeans, and they said, "Excuse me, are you the man that just spoke?" I said, well, "Yes, I am." And they said, "Well, we'd just like to say that you inspired us."
Oh, how lovely.
And I thought, and I remember driving home and thinking, I've got to do this, because if you can inspire people, I wish somebody had inspired me when I was 17. So, hopefully those two young men, maybe they're at university now, but hopefully they'll always remember that that interaction we had.
I'm absolutely sure that they will.
Oh,
And on this note, tell our listeners who perhaps have not yet heard of you, a little bit about. I know I touched on it to start with, but about your fascinating story and kind of some of those ups and downs, I guess, along the way.
Well, being born into a fundamentalist church, I mean, you get to the age of sort of 5, 6, 7, and you don't think there's anything different about you, because I had a close family. My parents weren't very well off, but they'd always looked after us well, and I was the eldest of 6 children, so I came, I was the firstborn, and I mean, life was okay. I can't say I grew up in hardship or anything like that. But I wasn't. Once I started school, for example, I wasn't allowed to have friends that weren't in the church, which is kind of difficult because you meet people, and then so I had to sit out of assembly at school and things like that. So you immediately start thinking, oh, there's something different about you. And then when I was about 11, we moved to London from Essex, and so I lived in London. Went to a very multicultural school, even in the 70s. London, is very multicultural. So I'm actually glad we moved to London, because London kind of opened my eyes to what was possible. And then I was 16 when I left school with my one GCSE that I left school with, and I went and got a job in an office, and the people in the office were kind of normal people, and I thought, well, these people are okay, so eventually they involved me in their social activities and things like that. And so which I wasn't supposed to do, but, I thought, well, I'm going to give this a go. And I thought, this is actually more the life I want than the life that's planned for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to have the life that I wanted, rather than the life that my family and the church had planned for me. And I left my parents' house at the age of 17. And went and got a job in a bar, because in those days you could live and work in lots of London bars had live-in staff, and so so I got a new job and a new place to live, and that's quite an experience, and fell into some bad company while I was there, and because of this desire to belong, which we all have. So I
intrinsically.
I decided to belong to the wrong group of people and got myself involved in petty crime. And very long story, but I ended up going to Borstal at the age of 19.
Oh goodness!
And what happened to me there's a gentleman, one of the prison officers, sat me down one day, and he looked at me, he said, "You're not a criminal." He said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Some of the lads that come through here, we know they're probably going to have a criminal lifestyle." He said, "You're not like that." He said, "Basically, go and have a look in the mirror, and decide who you want to be, because we don't want to see you back here." And so I thought to myself, yeah, did I actually walk away from my entire family? And I didn't see my mum for 27 years, and did I walk away from my entire family to be a criminal? I thought, no, actually, I didn't. So I'm going to look to sort of get back on the straight and narrow. And to this day, apart from a couple of speeding offences, I've not been back in court again.
Oh, bless you. And did you get back in touch with your mum after all those years?
I'm very pleased to say that I did. My father's still alive. He's 88, and my mum passed away in December 2017. And I was actually with her 5 days before she passed away. And we had re-established some kind of relationship over the last sort of 10 or 15 years, which was beyond my dreams at one point. But we did. I did used to go and see my parents quite regularly since about 2001, 2002. And they're still in the church and they believe what they believe, but sometimes your family comes before anything for me. And I have a good relationship with my dad now. Which a better relationship than I've ever had, because I've kind of worked hard to make that happen over the last 10 or 15 years.
I'm so pleased that had a happy ending. And, I couldn't agree with you more, actually. When you take a good, hard look in the mirror and have a look at life, I think you realise, that actually, all the, materialistic things that life has to offer, at the absolute heart of it is the family, family and friendships, that really matter the most over and above, anything else. I'm so pleased that you got back in touch with your mum.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. And, talk to me, a little bit about, when you actually came out of Borstal, you kind of then went on into learning and development, and found this path. I know that you said kind of, life is, you were almost quite philosophical about it. Life is this journey, this serendipitous kind of moving up and down through different parts, before finding kind of almost, the sweet spot, which clearly you have now in professional speaking. But talk to me a little bit about, what happened when you turned the corner from coming out of Borstal and actually started moving on up into the career of L&D and actually helping other people.
Well, that happened by accident, the learning and development thing, but completely. But these things, some of the best things that have happened in my life have happened by accident, which is another story. But no, I came out of Borstal and I was very fortunate in that a couple who I had been working for immediately before I went to Borstal, an Irish couple, they'd taken me, and I was actually homeless for one night in London many, many years ago. I slept on Victoria Station, and I found a job. Anyway, I found a job with these people, and I'm conscious of time. I can't tell my whole life story in half an hour, but they actually took me back in when I came out of Borstal and gave me a fresh start. So I don't know what would have happened to me if it hadn't been for John and Pauline Davern, and Pauline's still alive, and I've actually been in touch with her in the last few years and been over to Ireland where she now lives to see her and to thank her for what her and her husband did for me. And I had the people that have helped me in my life largely have been thanked, and I think that's important as well. And anyway, I went to work in their pub, and then very, very quickly I thought I was going to be in the licensed trade. I had dreams of actually having my own pub. Then I met a lady when I was 21. I think I was 21, and we got together, and she talked me into getting a proper job, as she put it. And so I got.
What's one of those?
Yeah, well, I mean, I did have a proper job for a long time, because I spent 24 years in the railway industry and working on the trains, selling teas and coffees, working in the restaurant. Eventually, I became a team leader and, led the sort of hospitality team on the trains on the East Coast Main Line, did that for a few years. And then in 1996, another happy accident happened in my life when I was offered the opportunity to go into training. And the first thing I said, it was the chief executive of the company, who approached me one day and said, we'd like you to get involved in training. I said, does that mean I've got to get up and speak in front of people? And he said, well, yes, it does. And he said, well, we can give you that skill. What we can't do is duplicate your experience of 17 years of doing what you do in customer service, you see. So I took the opportunity. I had to go for an interview for that position. And I remember having to do a presentation. I was terrified, and I'd written this presentation out on a piece of paper, and my hands were shaking. But somehow or other, I got selected, and that was the start of a whole new career in 1996-97 in learning and development, which I found that I thoroughly enjoy and still do, and people say I'm good at it as well. So it's a win-win, really.
You clearly are, and I think you've inspired a lot of people out there, which I think is wonderful to see. And I think part of that, if you don't mind me saying, is kind of the real authenticity and humble nature that you have. You're almost in a nice way, quite casual about the way that things happened. It's very very nice. It's very, very nice to see.
Thank you.
And just on the speaking note, you just described what I think is a really kind of lovely moment there, where kind of your hands are shaking and you're feeling really, really nervous, but actually you went in there and smashed it and got the job. I think that's brilliant. For those of our listeners who are tuning in today, who maybe they've got to go and give a big presentation, or they're nervous to do some public speaking, is there any kind of advice or any really wonderful, little nuggets that they might be able to take away?
I think people ask me about this sort of thing all the time. And I say to them, I spent 14 years in Toastmasters International, and I learned a lot in that organisation. So I'd say, if you want, if you seriously want to be good at speaking in public, and very, very few people are good at speaking in public. It's not a skill that we seem to give people in the UK. You have to actually look for opportunities to do it. You're not going to become good at public speaking by watching other people, yes, you'll get some ideas, but it's something that you have to learn by practicing and by doing it as much as possible. And that's what. So I mean, for example, I went to a networking event yesterday, and people stood up and spoke about their businesses, and very, very few of them seemed comfortable doing that. And I thought, it's really difficult for some people to get up and speak at all. And I think that there's a statistic that 80% of people are more scared of public speaking than they are of dying. And that sounds a bit extreme, but it
sounds a bit weighted, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. But most people, for me, as somebody who never dreamed in a million years that I would ever speak in public. I could talk about that journey for an hour, but it's something that I've had a lot of practice. I did it for nothing, and I've also helped a lot of other people with that. But it's something that you have to do a lot of, and the more you do, the better you get. It's like somebody said, one of the famous golfer, I think it was Arnold Palmer, said that the more you practice, the luckier you get, or something like that.
And there's so much truth in that, I know it sounds incredibly basic, but really just working hard and practicing.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely critical. And I think, I actually used to be very, very shy at school also, and over the years, starting to do more and more public speaking and really kind of pushing yourself out there and forcing yourself to do these things, actually. It's surprising that you can end up being actually quite comfortable with something. So no, completely concur. So to all of our listeners out there, keep practicing, keep pushing yourself to try and speak more frequently, and maybe even volunteer to do it. I find, you mentioned there, kind of volunteering to speak. I think actually voluntary work is a really fantastic way to kind of cut your teeth almost on becoming better. I spoke, actually, you mentioned speaking in a school to I think it was 250 people you mentioned to some of the
Mm.
youths. I did a couple of speaking pieces in schools quite recently for a charity called Working Options, and I
Okay.
have to say it was more petrifying than it was speaking to some of the execs in the
Yeah.
FTSE 250, because because bless them, they are not scared at all to say
No.
exactly what they think.
No.
But do you know what? They're absolutely, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think it's normal. We kind of, we get, if we don't get butterflies, we'll get a little bit nervous before we embark on something new or different. Then, what can we do really? It
Mm.
keeps you on your toes, almost keeps you quite fresh and engaged to want to do it. And that's normal, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think an audience of a teenage audience is probably the most difficult audience. If you can engage with a teenage audience, then you can engage with any audience.
I'm so glad that you said that.
No, seriously, because I've done quite a lot of work with the National Citizen Service over the last few years, public speaking workshops for 60 or 70 teenagers at a time. And I remember being actually more terrified about doing the first one of those that I ever did about 6 or 7 years ago than I've ever been, because I thought I'm in a lecture theatre with 60 or 70 teenagers, and I've got to actually command that stage, and I've got to get them to engage with me. And I could tell you stories about that. That was I absolutely loved that work. That was really getting young people on the road of public speaking at that age. And I think it should be taught in schools. I really do.
Absolutely. Do you know, I really, really do. I really do think that it should be taught in schools as well, because it's one of those skills whereby it's useful for anything that you go off and do in later life, because in some form or another, when we are communicating, with other people and other human beings, actually it's learning how to present oneself, and also, throughout life, and especially in business, there are many, many chances, to be speaking in front of and speaking other people, whether it be at kind of conferences or whether it be kind of, one-on-one sessions, with teams, I think it is an absolutely critical skill to learn. And I mean, talk to me a little bit, because I could seriously talk to you about some of these subjects all day, and I'm just conscious of time, so I can't believe that we've been speaking already for 20 minutes. It's incredible. So I'm going to quickly just whip on and just through a couple of questions here. Of course, the show is called Diverse and Inclusive Leaders,
Yes.
and clearly you've had a very interesting and diverse range of experiences throughout your business life and your personal life as well. But what does diversity and inclusion kind of mean to you?
Well, I think it means everybody gets an equal chance, no matter who they are, and that's something that I'm actually passionate about. That, about people getting the opportunity. It doesn't matter what background you come from. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what religion you are or what religion you're not. You should get an equal opportunity. It shouldn't be about sort of jobs for the boys or girls or whatever. I think people should be recognised for the talent that they have, and that talent should be developed. And people should. So that is just in a nutshell for me what diversity and inclusion is all about. And
I think that's a really nice way to explain it. I know we talk, diversity and difference and embracing individuals' differences, which I think is absolutely critical to kind of prevent that groupthink piece. But also, you mentioned, and especially I think the youth certainly feel this. I certainly did when I was younger. I think to extent, even as grown-ups in inverted commas, everyone feels, these kind of times where maybe they've not been included, or they have wanted to be included in something. Remembering, to just, even if it's small things, to actually kind of, be inclusive in our behavior, and be inclusive in, the way that we operate, whether it be kind of work or in life, as well. You said something really interesting, which was, actually, when you're younger, you kind of, you really want to fit in, and that's a human, that's a human need.
Yeah.
Almost. We want to try and fit in because it's our instinct to do so. And so when we don't necessarily feel included, actually it can be, it can be quite detrimental. I think it can cause, stress on many levels. And so, actually, how you've described that there, I think is really, really nice.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think we all want to belong somewhere. Even at my age, I still want to belong somewhere. So I belong to a couple of I belong to the Professional Speaking Association because that's my sort of professional tribe, if you like. So I belong to a couple of. I do quite a lot of voluntary work, so that I belong to. You could say I belong to. There's an organisation called Food Cycle where I go and volunteer there. We feed homeless people. So yeah, I think everybody needs to belong to something, and the problem when you're young is that, you tend to go and belong to the wrong things just for the sake of belonging to something.
Yeah, of course. And because, when you're young, you don't know necessarily, I'm not saying you don't know the difference between right or wrong, but that kind of, that desire to fit in and a desire to, almost be popular, you kind of, it's very easily to be persuaded by the wrong, by the wrong voices perhaps, and get carried along with it. I'm sure many of our listeners who are tuning in are thinking, yes, that's definitely happened to me when I was younger. But, life is one of those things, you find your tribes, and I'm a big believer in kind of positivity and finding people where, you can connect with them, not just, on a business level, in inverted commas, but, connect with them on a real human level, because I think actually, that is what makes all the difference. To that feeling of belonging. And I think, this food cycle piece, the voluntary work that you're doing, I think that's fantastic. And, certainly, I hope those that are listening in are thinking, if they're maybe not doing any kind of volunteering work or anything like that, that, maybe, they should find a bit of time for it, because it is incredibly rewarding. I worked for the Samaritans for 3 years, listening on the phones.
Wow.
I've done some work for the various different homeless charities, actually, as well, up in the Northwest. And if there's something that kind of really takes you back down to earth, if you feel like, oh God, I'm having a bit of a bad day here, or something's not going quite according to plan. Actually, you remember these guys and girls who were, kind of living on the streets, or, really feeling in kind of desperate hope, because maybe not having a very good time mentally. And actually, life is good, it's not bad. And there's good people out there. So like you very wisely said, try and find your tribe and try and find where you belong. And hopefully that's a positive place where you can continue to spread positive seeds and kind of, pieces of inspiration and positivity as you go.
Definitely.
Just moving on to another couple of quick questions. I'm going to call this like the lightning round, because I know that we've been talking for some time, and I really want to just kind of rattle through asking you a few things that I've been dying to ask you. So, tell me, kind of, what's your secret to success?
Not giving up, I think, and success isn't about necessarily having money and loads of possessions and nice cars and nice houses. It's about it's how you, whether you can look in the mirror and say you've been true to yourself, but never give up. In every area of life, I think I've not given up. I never gave up hope that I might have a relationship with my parents. I'm dating somebody at the moment. I was single for quite a long time, and that happened when I wasn't looking for it to happen. I think, and a lot of people will disagree with this, but I don't think you should plan too much. I think you should leave space for things to come into your life, kind of like spontaneously.
I agree, because if your life is so full, you're not leaving that open opportunity or window for something else to come in.
Yeah.
And no, and I, do you know, um, I think a lot more people, or I think a lot more of our listeners than you would think, would agree with that. And it's interesting, a number of the individuals that, I've been interviewing and speaking with, I've actually said the same. I've asked them, how did you get to, where you are in your career, the kind of, and might have been a very, very senior role, or done something really fantastic. How did you get there? And often it actually wasn't planned. And,
Yeah.
speaking to you has kind of confirmed part of that, for me, and perhaps, for some of our listeners, actually, if you are, if you're thinking about career change, if you're thinking about moving to the the next stage in one of the areas of your life, or whichever one that might be, actually, it's okay not to know what's coming next.
Yeah, and you have to find your passion. I mean, that's a word that's probably overused a bit as well. But I genuinely found my passion when I got into learning and development, and thence public speaking, because I actually realised that I could help a lot of people, and that's what it's all about for me. It's about helping other people, and whether I get paid for it or not, um, I like to help other people. And when somebody comes up to you, I volunteer at a homeless shelter near where I live. Um, and when somebody comes up to you 6 months after you've helped out, they've met you at the homeless shelter, and they come up to you in the street, they cross the street to speak to you and say, "Is that Graham?" And I say, "Yes, that's Graham." I say, how are you? I'd just like to say thank you. That's worth more than anything else.
How lovely.
Yeah, I was part of a team that helped that woman to become, to get into temporary accommodation and get herself back on her feet again. And I can't think of anything better to do for another human being than something like
Mm-hmm.
that. So
Showing
that's
that
worth.
kind and caring, it's worth more. It's worth more than any amount of money, isn't it?
I've got enough money to live on, and a little bit, probably a bit more than I need sometimes. But it's that it's not everything.
Mm-hmm. Bless you. And actually, after this, after we've come off air, remind me, because I must speak to you about a couple of speaking opportunities that I have,
Oh,
that
thank
I
you.
think could be brilliant for you.
Thank you very much.
But just moving quickly, just on to another couple of quick last questions before we go for today. Tell me, what's authentic leadership to you?
Oh, that's. I had an authentic leader in my career. The guy who gave me the opportunity to go into learning and development was what I call a servant leader, and he pretty much. I mean, one of my favourite quotes. I think I sent it to you. It was said by a guy called Jack Dupre, and I've never heard of this guy saying anything else. If you Google him, you don't come up with anything other than that quote. But he said the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality, and the last is to say thank you. And in between, the leader becomes a servant. So I've experienced that, where I had a leader in the workplace who got a team of people together, and he was a young guy. It wasn't the CEO guy. It was my line manager at the time. And I share this with everybody that I do management training with. And he had 5 goals. He had 5 goals on a flip chart. And he said to us, right, he said, I think those are the 5 goals that this team should be working to achieve. And I remember looking at those goals and thinking, well, that's what we should be doing anyway. But no one's ever actually put it in words before.
Mm-hmm.
He said, so if you agreed on those goals, he said, if anybody wants to challenge any of the goals, then he said, I'm very willing to listen. He said, if we're all agreed on those 5 goals, he said, then what do you need from me as your leader if you're going to go out and achieve those goals? And that was a really powerful. I mean, this guy was 27 years of age at the time, and he'd just come into management. And where he learnt that from, I don't know. But he inspired a group of people who were quite long serving. There were people there that had been around in that business for 20 years and more. And they were like, wow, no one's ever spoken to us like that before. No one had ever included us. It had always been top down, do this, do this, do this. And it was kind of, now we're being asked for our opinions. It was like, wow, it opened up a whole,
Makes such a difference. It makes such a difference. And a good friend of mine, Sharon Amesu, who you may know
Sharon.
actually.
I know Sharon. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on Sharon's committee up in the Northwest for the IAD. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've met Sharon. Sharon won the Speaker Factor competition in the Professional Speaking Association 2 or 3 years ago. And so I've followed her. She won. Yeah, she's a fellow member of the Professional Speaking Association. We've met at the conferences we have several times. So yeah.
Yes, I thought that you would know Sharon, and she's fantastic. She was on the first ever episode of the podcast, Diverse and Inclusive Leaders.
Oh,
actually.
Wow.
But yeah, no, she's fantastic, and she talks a lot, about servant leadership, which you mentioned. How can I serve you? Actually, that's a very, very, very powerful thing that you've just discussed there. Actually asking. As it's so simple, asking the team who may not have once, been included, perhaps, to date, actually asking everyone, their thoughts and their feelings, not to necessarily say that you're going to follow everything that everyone says, but actually taking on board, how those individuals may feel about things, I think is, like you say, is very, very, very important, and a powerful technique. So last couple of quick questions that I have, 'cause I'm just conscious of time here.
Sure.
And you mentioned a really nice quote as well. You also mentioned another actually in our kind of email correspondence, which is one of my favorite quotes ever. So I'm thinking actually that's a very, very nice way to kind of end the show today. But tell me, have you got any kind of favorite heroes or sheroes, as I like to call them, books, authors, any kind of quotes, that are particularly interesting or inspiring, or you think that others might be able to learn from?
Well, I think the quote that you referred to is probably my second favourite quote, which is, people don't remember what you say, people don't remember what you do, but they remember how you make them feel. And that totally and utterly resonates with me. And it has been attributed to Maya Angelou, but I believe it was said by somebody else first. And I do like to attribute quotes to the right people. She did definitely say it, but I think she heard it somewhere else. From I can't remember the name of the guy that I have researched.
I think it's Carl Booner.
Yes, that's right.
Yes,
yes, Carl Booner. I never remember the name of the person that said it, but I always remember the quote. And that for me that kind of encapsulates life for me. People don't remember necessarily. People won't remember what. I know that if I do a speaking engagement, for example, people aren't going to remember everything that I say and do, but they're hopefully going to remember the feeling they got, the emotion that they felt during that interaction, and that hopefully can take them into people, sort of take people somewhere where maybe they haven't been before, and make them realise that I'm just an ordinary guy. I mean, if I can do some of the stuff I've done, then anybody can do it. Nothing special about me, really, but I've just kind of done a little bit better than survive, I suppose.
I love your British modesty, but I'm going to say, in order to summarise today, and I'm going to give a quick summary actually of some of the pieces of learning that you've inspired me, and I'm sure that there are many of our listeners who are listening, tuning in today, who have really been quite touched by that story, because I think you've experienced some wonderful things, and the way that you've talked about some of the pieces of life, I think is really quite beautiful actually. So in summary, and on that note, on that quote that I absolutely love by Carl Booner, I think that's brilliant. But a number of things that I've certainly learned from kind of today's podcast, are to kind of, first of all, there's that servant leadership that was mentioned. For anyone who's listening, do look it up. Servant leadership, it is an incredibly powerful technique, and hopefully it's being implemented within your organisation. If not, don't be scared to raise a hand and mention it, because actually, it can be really such a powerful way to drive forward positive change. And also, I love the piece that you said about kind of finding your tribe. I think this intrinsic human need that we all need to have to belong is absolutely critical. And so, for anyone who is listening out there, if you're feeling, perhaps not included at the moment, or you feel like things could be going better, then do kind of, don't be scared to kind of go out and reach out into the world and see who else you can connect with on a human level, because I'm sure there are loads of people out there. Get in touch with us even. We'd love to hear from you. Another quick piece as well that kind of I really took away from today's session was, not to be scared if you don't know where you're heading next. Actually, life is full of these wonderful serendipitous moments where chance meetings happen, whether it be business or in personal life. And you think, oh my goodness, how on earth has that happened? You described a number throughout our conversation. I think that's fantastic. So, for those of you who are kind of running around, incredibly manically, worrying about where all the time has gone, try and take a little bit of time for yourself and try and create a little bit of space in life, because you'll be surprised at what comes in to fill that little void if you do have a gap there. And just to finish today's show on the note that Graham mentioned before, people don't remember what you do, people don't remember what you say, but people do remember how you made them feel. I think that's just such a gorgeous way to kind of end off today, and say a massive thank you to you as well, Graham, for kind of joining me today on the show. It's been really wonderful to have you here. And quickly, actually, for any of our listeners who would like to get in touch with Graham directly, he's available for public speaking and he is fantastic. You can get in touch with him directly on www.grahamfrost.com, or you can get hold of him on LinkedIn and reach out to him there, Graham Frost. Or you can visit our show notes, and I'm going to put all the quotes and all of the pieces from today's session into there when the podcast goes live. So you'll be able to see that on www.leilamckenzie.com/podcast, and there'll be a summary of Graham's episode in there, along with some of the wonderful kind of pieces that he's mentioned there around servant leadership, and some of the quotes that were mentioned in today's show. So I will say thank you very much again, Graham. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. The pleasure's all mine. Thank you.
My name is Leila McKenzie. You have been listening to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast, and I'm looking forward already to seeing you again very, very soon. Take care for now. Bye.
Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.